if there is one thing, that St. Francis and Pope Francis share in common, that is, they are both dreamers. They are both visionaries. That is why I entitled my presentation to you as Francis's Dream. I believe that this is exactly what we all need, especially during this time. The capacity to dream big dreams and to make sure that they'll be realized in our institutions. Pope Francis has this to say in Fratelli, Tutti: how important it is to dream together. By ourselves, we risk seeing mirages, things that are not there. Dreams, on the other hand, are built together. This is what I believe Pope Francis is trying to bring to our attention in his new encyclical. The power of dreaming together with a sure hope that we can still improve our current situation. I would like all of us to approach this encyclical not just as a long treatise of dogmas and boring teachings from the Church's magisterium, but as an articulation of how we can bring heaven into this valley of tears through our concerted efforts and labors. But first, let us all try to get a definition of what a dream is. And here, let us consult Merriam-Webster. Our dictionary, as this definition with regards to dream. The first one is that a dream is a series of thoughts, images, or emotions occurring during sleep. Interestingly, many of the visions that happen in the Bible occur during sleeping moments. Let us take, for example, Saint Joseph, the husband of the Blessed Virgin Mary. All the angels' guidance and direction were provided during his moments of rest. I was reminded that during the visit of our Holy Father here in the Philippines, Pope Francis shared how he used to have an image of that sleeping Saint Joseph in his stable, and how he would sometimes lift in some of his prayer requests with a gentle wish to Saint Joseph. Saint Joseph, I'm already tired. Please worry about these concerns for me. I need to sleep. And then, by some miraculous intervention, he would wake up with a gentle assurance of what is needed to be done. I guess that is important. Dreams can only happen if we acknowledge our own limitations and simply allow God to work His wonders after we have done the best thing that we can do. In order to dream, first, rest. The second definition is that a dream is an experience of waking life having the characteristics of a dream, such as A visionary creation of the imagination, B, a state of mind marked by abstraction or release from reality, C, an object seen in a dream-like state. Here, we learn that dreams do not only occur during sleep, but also when we are awake. I guess some of our students are already an expert on this. But here we know that a dream is a product of the vision of the future by great visionaries. Pope Francis himself cited some of them as inspiration for his encyclical, like Blessed Charles de Foucauld, Desmond Tutu, and Mahatma Gandhi. He also mentioned Martin Luther King Jr., who was famous for his speech entitled, "I Have a Dream." If we come to think of it, we are all here standing where we are now because of the people who dreamt of a much more beautiful future for all of us. And certainly, Pope Francis would want us, through this encyclical, to do exactly that. As what we used to say to our young people, libre ang mangarap, bok. And so, we should continue to dream. The third definition that I see there is that a dream is something notable for its beauty, excellence, or enjoyable quality. Here we learn that a dream is directed towards a vision for something that is beautiful and excellent. In our theology, we learn that as God's creatures, we are all naturally directed towards beauty, because beauty for us must be good. Let's try this. How do you translate good in Tagalog? Mabuti? Well, maybe that's correct, but try this. Translate good morning into Tagalog. Is that mabuting umaga? No. We translate it to magandang umaga because that is for us what is beautiful. Kaya yung iba dyan na walang nakikitang maganda sa buhay nila, pumapangit. But in Fratelli, Tutti, Pope Francis emphasizes that no one can experience the true beauty of life without relating to others, without having real faces to love. Here we can see that your encounter with someone becomes truly deep if you begin to have common dreams already for each other. Number 4, dream is a strongly desired goal or purpose. You may be familiar with a best-selling book written by Rick Warren, and the title is A Purpose-Driven Life. Dream is something like that. Pope Francis in this encyclical challenges us to rediscover our vocation as citizens of our respective nations and of the entire world, to direct society to the pursuit of the common good, and with this purpose in mind, to persevere in consolidating its political and social order, its fabric of relations, its human goals. He further emphasized that the existence of each and every individual is deeply tied to that of others. Life is not simply time that passes. Life is a time for interactions. Here, it is quite clear that our dream is made concrete when we have people to dream with us. And so, right here at the very onset, Pope Francis challenges us to embark on a journey which his predecessors have started. That is what he intends to do with this encyclical. But before we continue, it would be good to explain what is an encyclical. You know, although the term encyclical originally meant a circular letter, something that we receive from the higher-ups in our offices, in the Catholic Church, it took on a much more specific meaning. In 1740, Pope Benedict XIV wrote a letter entitled Ubi Primum, which is generally regarded as the first encyclical in a modern sense. The term is now used almost exclusively for a kind of letter sent out by the Pope. We know that the Pope has different forms of communications released in his many engagements like homilies, letters, messages, etc. We can say that an encyclical is at the very top of that hierarchy. We also said that this is already the third encyclical released under his pontificate. The first one is Lumen Fidei, which he signed on June 29, 2013. Which is practically just 108 days after his election. This is the reason why many critics would say that this encyclical is practically the work of Pope Benedict XVI, which he was not able to release before he resigned. Thus, we can say that we can get a better appreciation of how Pope Francis thinks in his second encyclical. And the title of that encyclical is Laudato Si. He signed this encyclical on May 24, 2015. I hope that by now many of you are already familiar about its contents, even if they are just some bite-sized ideas. You know, we actually released a booklet with a list of 10 key ideas from Laudato Si in order to make it easier to explain to simple folks. Also, this year, 2020, is declared by the Vatican as a Jubilee for the Earth to celebrate the 5th anniversary of the release of this encyclical. And now, Pope Francis comes with his third encyclical, which is very similar to his second one, that is Laudato Si. He entitled it Fratelli, Tutti, which he signed in Assisi on October 3, 2020, on the eve of the feast of Saint Francis of Assisi, which many of us Franciscans would call as the Feast of the Transitus, which literally means the transit of Saint Francis into eternal life. Yes, the picture that you are now seeing is the most blessed catacomb of our beloved founder, which is very humble and simple. Like its predecessor, Fratelli Tutti does not come with a Latin title, but with a language spoken by many, Italian. That in itself is already a statement that what the Pope would like to bring in this encyclical is not just a series of old concepts and ideas, but a new one, and hopefully understandable by many. With Fratelli Tutti, Pope Francis again reflects a wider conversation. In addition to many references to Scripture, the encyclical cites about 292 sources that is scattered in its 288 footnotes. The majority of the citations comes from his own writings like Laudato Si, Evangelii Gaudium, and World Day of Peace messages. Most importantly, Francis cites in this encyclical his joint statement with Sheikh Ahmed Al-Tayeb on human fraternity, which he cited a total of 9 times, including a substantial quote at the end. I will be saying more about that later. As I have mentioned, he explained that this encyclical is greatly inspired by Saint Francis of Assisi, which for him expressed the essence of a fraternal openness that allows us to acknowledge, appreciate, and love each person, regardless of physical proximity, regardless of where he or she was born or lives. You may very well know that St. Francis never considered himself to be a scholar, like some of our great doctors in the church. But it is actually his simplicity that attracted many to consider his example, whether they be Catholics or not. In his encyclical, Pope Francis mentioned that Francis did not wage a war of words aimed at imposing doctrines. He simply spread the love of God. There's even one popular quote that is attributed to Saint Francis of Assisi that states, "Preach as of always. If necessary, use words." Imagine that. Well, the biggest influence of Saint Francis in his encyclical is really the title itself. We know that when the title of this encyclical was released, many commentators already criticized it for it being not so inclusive. Why Fratelli Tutti and not Fratelli e Sorelle Tutti? That is, why not brothers and sisters to all? Well, just like Laudato Si, the title is actually a direct quote from Francis's admonitions, which states, "Let all of us, brothers, consider the Good Shepherd who bore the suffering of the cross to save his sheep." In the rule, St. Francis wrote for those who desire to follow him in this way of life something that is similar to what was mentioned earlier. All of you are brothers. Do not call anyone on earth your father. You have but one Father in heaven. Understandably, the common sense interpretation of the term views the concept as exclusively masculine, referring to the bond among brothers or brotherhood. Dito nga sa Pilipinas, di ba? Kapag nababanggit yung salitang fraternity, ang mabilis na sumasagi sa ating isip, frat. And frat is often associated with hazing and gang wars in our schools. But Francis didn't mean that. For him, he, like Saint Francis of Assisi, would regard brother as something that is very important. You know, in the writings of Saint Francis of Assisi, he would use the word brother about 306 times. That is second to the word Lord, which he used 410 times. The term brother is essentially a relative term. It signifies relationships. This relationship is largely interpersonal and is even more than maternal love, according to him. Take note of that. When St. Francis spoke to the brothers of how to take care of another, they should be like mothers to each other. But fraternity is way more than that. In fact, in his testament, St. Francis said that the Lord gave me brothers, which means that a brother is a gift. Dating back to St. Francis himself, whenever the Franciscan friars refer to their local communities of men religious, the term used has been fraternity. It is also a term that is used by the secular Franciscan order or the Third Order in reference to the local communities or associations of women and men who have professed to live according to the Franciscan rule of life. In this way, we can see that fraternity takes on a rather practical meaning, serving as the term for a particular group of Franciscans. But I guess for us Filipinos, we will not have that same problem. Because for us, we will just translate it simply as kapatid. At para sa atin makahulugan yung salitang kapatid. Because the word kapatid is simply about connection, connectivity. Magkakapatid tayo dahil iisa lang ang ating pinagpatiran. Galing tayong lahat sa iisang sinapupunan. And that is what we all are. We all come from God, and that is where we should all go back in the end. Thus, our being magkakapatid is more expansive and has to do with the kind of relationship one has with another. Becoming a bro or sis is very important to Pope Francis as he saw our inherent bond as being related to all women, men, and even non-human creatures as part of God's one family of creation. You may very well know that the title of Pope Francis' second encyclical Laudato Si is also inspired by Saint Francis. And that is taken from the Canticle of Creatures, which expands relationship into a more cosmic one. Thus, he looks around and sees brother sun, sister moon, brother wind, sister air, etc. In fact, at the end, he calls death as a sister. Sister death, as he would used to say. Lest we forget, we will all die. And that fact should help us see the greater need for us to harmoniously coexist. To talk about fraternity as a disposition or value is to talk about how you view and relate to other people, including strangers and those who may be very different from you. It is about recognizing intrinsic familial ties with all people and creatures. Pope Francis picks up on this Franciscan logic of fraternitas in the third chapter of Fratelli, Tutti. He critiques societal relationships determined by affinity, preferences, status, or any other feature and argues for a more fundamental concept of human relationship. Fraternity, according to him, is born not only of a climate of respect for individual liberties or even of a certain administratively guaranteed equality, because fraternity necessarily calls for something greater, which in turn enhances freedom and equality. So in summary, in this encyclical, Pope Francis would like us to continue to dream for a society with warm human relationship. For the second half of my talk, allow me to elaborate on what would be Pope Francis's dream as presented in his encyclical Fratelli, Tutti. The first one would be a dream of peace through dialogue. Early in the document, the Pope recalls St. Francis's famous encounter with Sultan Malik al-Kamil at Damietta, Egypt in 1219, drawing a connection to that historic episode of mutual respect, peacemaking, and fraternity, where he sees a shared sense of fraternal bond between these two men from different cultures and religions. Pope Francis identified a comparable sense of encounter he had with Grand Imam Ahmad al-Tayyib when he met in Abu Dhabi in 2019. You know, last year I was in Abu Dhabi to celebrate the traditional Simbang Gabi with our OFWs, and they were all ecstatic with the success of this meeting, which coincided with a year of tolerance declared in UAE. At that meeting, the two religious leaders signed a document that would be the seed of this new encyclical. The title is Human Fraternity for World Peace and Living Together. That document has this to say: God has created all human beings equal in rights, duties, and dignity, and has called them to live together as brothers and sisters. This is equally important to us today as we draw near to the closing of the year of ecumenism, interreligious dialogue, and indigenous people. You know, one producer of our Bible diaries would use this image of St. Francis's embrace with the Sultan as a symbol for authentic dialogue. Allow me to say something about this meeting. You know, this historic meeting happened during the time of the Crusades, when Catholic empires entered into a series of wars against the Muslims in order to maintain our ownership of the Holy Land, which is the heart of the world's three major religions. In 1217, the first general chapter of the Friars Minor was celebrated at St. Mary of the Angels, that is near Assisi. In an act of inspiration, St. Francis of Assisi decided to send his friars to all nations. He crossed the border of the Fifth Crusade's battle to engage in a peaceful encounter and exchange of ideas with the Sultan, despite the vilification of the Muslims by the majority of Christian Europe at that time, and that includes Pope Innocent III. It is understandable that many would want to go to the Holy Land, but St. Francis's visit there proved to be a marked contrast to the actions of the Crusaders. Though the intent of the protection of the holy sites was a goal of both groups, let me share to you a video of what may have transpired in that visit, which is based on a play which we produced when we are still seminarians. The video quality may be a bit poor, but the content of their dialogue is something very interesting. Let's watch this video.
Well, little man, I see you have courage. You've journeyed through the roads of my country, roads from which no Christian foot can step without expecting death. And now, as you stand in my tent, I see your steady eyes, and I say to myself, I would like this man in my court. They would tell me the truth, not what I usually hear. Well, holy man, what do you want of me?
We wish to preach God's words and to die as martyrs to our faith.
Ah, that's easily arranged. No problem at all. Stand back, you dogs. I give the orders here. Please forgive my blood-hungry countrymen. Now, holy man, what do you want of me?
Only to bring you peace, great one.
But I want war, little Italian. I am conquering the world for Allah. That is why I was born. That is why I am Allah's instrument.
But great Sultan, I am not talking about peace. That is the opposite of war. I speak of peace in your heart. A deep satisfaction and joy that flows from within like a rich red wine.
And what can give more inner peace to a warrior than victory in the battlefield?
Prayer, O child of Allah. Prayer.
Prayer? And do I not pray every day? Several times a day to Allah?
More, I am sure, great leader, than many Christians pray. But we want to teach you a new prayer that we have learned by waging the great battle within ourselves, by conquering one by one the demons in our own hearts. Your prayer is good, I am sure. We want to teach you a new prayer.
Pray it for me now, here in front of this dullard who infests my tent. Holy man, dear brother, come here. Come here. I wish in my heart that there will be more gentlemen like you who will balance the forces of hatred and violence. Unfortunately, the world understands only two things: power and violence. Someday, your prayer says to me, the world will be turned upside down by little men who fast and pray and who die rather than take up the sword. But until that day comes, inshallah, it seems to me, can only be performed through violent men like me.
Then, Lord Sultan, will you pray for that day?
Little brother, little man, I will do more. I will let you let out of this camp alive so that you can pray for that day. I pray when after I am gone from this earth, but not before, Allah will change His mind and use me instruments like you, and that this great army of peace-loving beggars will balance and outnumber the forces of hatred and violence. Go to your drink. Dogs, take these fools out from our camp and give them safe passage to their people. I will not lower myself by harming vermin and beggars and threadbare Christians. You can see from their appearance how badly we have beaten down the Christians. Go!
Peace be to you.
Peace be to you.
You know, while the video is very romantic, more factual research would tell us that Malik Al-Kamil, whom St. Francis met, may not be that tough as we imagined him to be. He is in fact recognized as a peace-loving individual. He may be familiar with the Christians, in fact, since Egypt became a Muslim-majority area only approximately in the 10th century. Up until then, the majority had been Christians. The most widespread Christian domination in Egypt in the times of Malik Al-Kamil was the Coptic Orthodox Church, and this is true for today as well. That means Malik Al-Kamil, as the ruler of Egypt, knew Christians and their habits quite well. And Malik Al-Kamil exemplified the Islamic laws of war. For example, after Al-Kamil defeated the Franks during the Crusades, Oliverus Scholasticus praised and commented on how Al-Kamil supplied the defeated Frankish army with